There is a big difference between making healthy lifestyle choices from a place of self-love and self-respect at our core and making lifestyle choices from a place of feeling flawed, that there's something wrong with us, that there's something bad about us that we have to fix. The first one comes from a healthy sense of worthiness, a healthy sense of self-love, a healthy sense of I am lovable and valuable and I want to take care of myself. The other one comes more from shame. The sense that there is something bad about me at my core. I'm rotten even. There's something that needs to be fixed about me and I need to work really hard. I need to exercise really hard. I need to diet really hard. I need to do all the different things in order to fix that sense of shame that we might be feeling at our core, both kind of unconsciously and more consciously. Meaning we might not even realize that we're operating from a sense of badness within ourselves that we're trying to get away from, that we're trying to fix. In this video, I want to talk to you about shame, and I want to talk about how to heal shame. This has been one of the biggest pieces of my own healing journey, of healing shame from my childhood, and how to integrate and grow and heal from that space. Especially if you might be someone that have experienced family situations or school situations or relationships or just cultural conditioning as a whole, where we're taught to criticize ourselves, or we're taught that we were bad or wrong or not beautiful, or we had to constantly fix ourselves in order to receive love from others, or in order to be worthy, in order to be lovable. And we can go deep into understanding where more toxic shame, that internalized shame that I was talking to you about in the beginning, where that comes from, as it will likely come from our attachment wounding or how we learned we were lovable or worthy from our parents or our caregivers, our families, or from school, or from our peers. These different places where the sense that we're not good enough as we are, and the sense that we're not worthy as we are, we're not lovable, came from those beliefs became an internalized identity, right? Like we actually started believing that we are the feeling of shame, or we are that sense of shame where there's something bad about us, and that's who we are at our core, right? Depending at the level of complexity of our trauma, of our attachment wounding, or, just having maybe a few experiences from school where we were not included, or we felt abandoned, or we felt like we weren't part of the group in some way. Those experiences can make us download or make us believe that there's something wrong with us at our core, right? And from there springs these behaviors and feelings about ourselves that we have to get away from, that sense of badness, that sense of flawedness, that sense of there's something wrong and bad about myself that I have to fix, right? And that is internalized shame. I want to also use this book right here as a reference for this video. It's called Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. This book is the absolute OG when it comes to understanding shame, because it goes so deep into the different places, the roots of shame, where it comes from, how it's affected us, and how it can also be healed. And it gives such an in-depth understanding of our own behaviors, our own feelings of ourselves, and gives just a really good overview of understanding shame. So highly recommend reading if you haven't already. It is so good. And it's a book that I use a lot with my own self, but then also a recommendation for my clients, as I work with clients that have this sense of feeling like there's something fixed or there's something wrong often that we need to fix about ourselves. And what was really interesting is that I started seeing this working as a personal trainer for many years, where I saw that many people wanted to make lifestyle changes, exercise, eat healthy, take care of themselves, often from a shame-based place. That there was this sense that there's something wrong about my body, about myself, that I've been not taking care of myself for however many years, and now I have to fix that. And while that can be a very empowering place to be, if it's from a space of the shame that we're feeling about where we're at is a fleeting thing, it's a situational thing. Okay, I haven't taken care of my body the way that I wanted to, and the way that I deserve, and the way that my body deserves my respect. But the shame that I'm feeling about it isn't like an internalized identity, meaning that there is something wrong about me as a human being, as a soul at my core, right? And what is really amazing and great about this book is that it doesn't say that shame is bad in itself. John Bradshaw says that shame has a healthy aspect to it when it's fleeting and when it's situational. When we know that we have done something that isn't in alignment with where we want to go, where it's maybe hurtful to ourselves or to other people. And we feel that sense of, okay, now I just feel uncomfortable. I feel like there's something wrong that needs to be done in order for me to get on the right path. That's healthy shame, right? That is us knowing our limitations. That is us knowing that we need to make some corrections. But that is not toxic shame. Toxic shame is the sense of internalized shame, that there's something bad or flawed or rotten or something that really needs to be fixed about myself. And it's this emotional feeling that is both an emotion, but then it's also an identity. And it's something that's pervasive, meaning that it's something that has, if we experienced a lot of shaming when we were growing up, maybe we were yelled at a lot, or we were criticized a lot, or we didn't feel like we were yelled at, but we didn't receive love after that we had maybe done something that was bad, or we didn't feel connected to our caregivers or to friends and family after something quote unquote bad happened, which can leave us feeling shame and leave us, like as young children, feeling that there's something wrong or bad about me because this grown-up just yelled at me, and they're now, they're not showing that they still love me afterwards. They're not, and that might create then a belief in myself that I'm not lovable and I'm bad because I touched the stove and it was dangerous, and now my parent isn't showing that they're loving me, right? So it's understanding that if that happened a lot over time, and not just within our families, but at school as well, where we experienced things that felt shameful, that made us believe that there was something wrong about us, and we didn't get connection after the thing happened, that is when we might create an identity of shame. And like I said in the beginning, it's not necessarily something that we're always aware of. The more we kind of do this work and we start understanding these things within us, and like, where am I operating from a belief that I'm not good enough, or that I'm unworthy when I'm doing this thing, when I'm working really hard, when I'm exercising or training? Am I feeling like there's something bad or wrong about me if I don't do this? That I'm not lovable if I don't exercise, if I'm not lovable, that I don't work really, really hard, right? And this is the thing that's really interesting to understand, is like, their internalized shame, if we're gonna see how that manifests itself, there are three really big ones. And number one is perfectionism. The feeling like everything I do, the work I provide or do at work, or the exercise that I do, or even workaholism, that comes from often internalized shame. And a shame-based identity, if we're doing it kind of chronically, where we're feeling everything has to be perfect, and if it's not, something bad's going to happen, or it means something bad about myself, because we're constantly avoiding feeling that sense of shame and that really gross, icky feeling that we might feel inside that comes up if we feel like we're not doing something perfect. And like I said, I mentioned it too, workaholism, like being obsessed with work, is often very venerated in our society, right? Like we're taught like, oh, they're such a hard worker, they're so ambitious, and they're doing all these things. The thing is, a lot of overworking, or a lot of working, comes from a sense of wanting to avoid the feeling of shame and feeling of not feeling good enough, and it's compensation essentially, right? And of course, we can then go into, if you had like a third one as well, where how internalized shame can show up, it's people pleasing. It's the sense that we have to, if we don't make people happy, or we're not really kind and overly giving and, telling people what they want to hear, then we might be left with a feeling of shame, like the feeling of maybe disappointing someone feels so shameful to us that we will then people please as a compensation. This one is more common for women, I'd say. So it's really understanding that internalized shame is like this identity that younger parts of ourselves might have taken on, believing that they're wrong or bad, or there's something, flawed about them that they need to fix, that they should be fixed. And the way to heal this, right? The way to heal internalized shame is to, first and foremost, have self-awareness around this aspect of ourselves, to become aware of the situations in life where we feel that trigger that comes up, where we feel like, okay, if I'm not doing this one thing, or if I'm being criticized right now and I feel a lot of shame come up, and I'm making it believe like, oh, I'm always doing this bad thing, I'm always doing this wrong, and I'm always, now I'm going to be fired, or they hate me, now I hate myself maybe, right? Like if that's something that comes up a lot, then that's something to look at. That is, and again, there's an identity there that might have been taken on at a certain time or over a certain period of time, but depending on what we've been through, depending on the level of complexity of what we've been through, the level of, if it was abuse, or if it was emotional neglect, or it was severe or not severe, that is going to be individual for each and every one of us. But self-awareness is the number one thing. And number two, how to heal shame, is to create acceptance for the parts of ourselves that felt like they weren't good enough. If we felt shame when we were experienced something in high school or in kindergarten even, and we weren't included for something, and we felt like we were alone standing there on the schoolyard, giving that aspect of ourselves compassion and acceptance, and saying the things that that part of ourselves needed, that younger version of ourselves needed now, to let them know that they are still lovable and they're still worthy of being included, and they still belong. They still, maybe they experienced something that was really horrible and excluding, but now it is possible that they are included, at least within ourselves, right? So that was number two, of doing the inner child work around this and creating more self-acceptance. And then also number three is recognizing that there is a healthy shame is a thing, and we need it as human beings to know that where we're veering or how we're directing ourselves, we need it as a limitation to show us what's right and what's wrong. And kind of getting to know that shame is when it's integrated in a sense, and we've created a relationship with it, that we can use it as a way that is healthy, versus being terrified of feeling it ever, and doing everything we can to avoid feeling it, right? And this is something that's really interesting because we live in a society too that is very like, shame is the worst thing ever and we can never feel it and no one should feel shame ever. And, and I don't believe that's really true. We need to integrate it. We need to be in relationship with shame, but not in a toxic sense, not in the internalized sense where we make it mean that we're bad or wrong or unvaluable or unlovable, right? It's used as a way for us to navigate and to know when to apologize, to know when to know that we've done something that can be corrected, but that doesn't mean anything about ourselves as human beings. So I mentioned 3 things where it's self-awareness. Number 2, doing the inner child work to create more self-acceptance and self-compassion. Number 3 is kind of getting to know the emotion of shame, and that knowing that it has the healthy aspect of it and the more toxic internalized aspect of it. And with that too, that might require us to create capacity in our bodies and our nervous systems and our emotions to feel those things that we might be trying to get away from, meaning create capacity for us to feel that shame, but doing it from maybe like a more mindful state of mind, like kind of seeing it as an emotion that isn't us. We're disidentifying ourselves from the emotion of shame, even if it feels really heavy and really, really intense, knowing that we're not it. But by getting to know it, by letting it pass through us, through feeling it, and through letting it pass through, that is where it stops having power over us and it gets to be digested, it gets to be healed. And then maybe even the underlying emotions that often come with shame, like anger or grief or sadness, emotions that might have been shamed by people around us, then they can also be digested and processed. And we don't have to walk around feeling like we have to do everything we can to get away from these emotions that feel scary to us or felt scary to us when we were younger. But as adults now, we have the capacity to be with them without letting them overtake us or overflow us. And this takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that I've experienced myself happen overnight. This has been a long process of healing and being able to create more capacity in my nervous systems to be with and recognize and notice the different sensations in my body that come up as that life happens. And as I can start regulating myself more and more and more, not taking things like shame as an internal experience, meaning I'm actually believing what those voices are telling me. And this is something that I've discovered with my journey as well. I had the most intense inner critic voice, like the most self-hating voice that was really bad. And that made it so that I went into overtraining and feeling like I had to perfect my body and that I had to constantly exercise and strength train. And even though that was a really healthy aspect in a lot of different ways, and it still is, a lot of it came from internalized shame and an identity that I felt like I was bad or wrong or flawed, and I had to prove my worthiness. I had to prove my lovability through my strength and my body, right? And this is what I've discovered as well through this inner work and integrating and doing shadow work and doing body work and trauma healing work, is that the inner critic voice that I used to have that was really intense, it's disappeared more or less. Sometimes I'll have like a fleeting thing come through, but it's just fleeting. It's not something that sticks around. The looping that I'd go into where something would happen and it would trigger shame, and I'd stay in these loops of shaming myself even more and hating myself even more, that's disappeared. And that is just the hope of doing this inner work that is so important to remember and to know that it does get better and we do feel so much more whole. We feel compassion becomes a natural part of our being. Compassion for ourselves becomes a natural part of our being. Self-respect becomes a natural part of our being. That example I started with, saying that we do the healthy lifestyle choices because they are a sign of our own self-love and respect. That is what happens, where it comes from this inner sense of, I'm doing this because I love myself and I respect myself, not because I'm trying to fix something that I feel like is bad or wrong about myself. And then also just knowing that, again, shame is there as a fleeting, like it has a purpose to be a fleeting sense of, and situational sense of, this is where I can shift or change so that I can get back on track, or get into alignment with where I really want to go, and where I can get into track of, I'm doing something because I love and respect myself, right? And I'm not doing it from a sense of, I hate myself, right? So with that, I will end it at that. There's a lot of information here, but I do really recommend reading the book, Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. It is so transformational. If you'd like deeper support with this, if you are on a journey of healing and fulfillment, and you are in a space of trying to piece things out within yourself, and you also want a coach on that road, or you want guidance on that path, feel free to look at the information I have below, so that we can potentially work together if that's right for us and you. With that, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just wishing you so much love and awareness and hope and power on your path of healing and growing.